Basically, when I look at my career choices and everything, my work with NGOs, the Psy organization with cybercare, that led me into counseling and teaching. But then, my mom's death, my brother's subsequent suicide, that put me into very much working with grief and loss, suicide in that area. That's why, if you see my CV, I've got this word thanatologist there. That's where it comes from. I work with that. There was a lot going on at that time that we didn't know. And there's a lot going on that was behind the surface. To tell you the truth, to help my brother would have not been at the point of suicide, would have been about 2 years before that. Because my mother died first. If my mother had not died, my brother would be alive. Because my mother's death created a whole barrage of things. Then things became very hard. My mom had a brain aneurysm, so there was like, we were joking in the morning. My mother had actually, my mother was, she's like, at that point in time, she's actually how old I am now, 47. And she was a bit, she was tired of putting kanmei on, the black color eyeshadow on every day. So she had gone and tattooed eyeshadow. Didn't tell anybody, but she had gone and tattooed eyeshadow in order to, to have, and of course she had red eyes. So people all thought she was sick. Actually, she wasn't sick. And she hadn't told us what she had done. But that morning, when she died, she actually told us that she had gone, and she actually told me. So we were laughing about it in the morning. And then in the evening, she had passed away. She had the only other indication we had is she had major migraines. We didn't realize what it is. So she had a brain aneurysm, and unfortunately, it was one of those ones where, it just, was a major brain aneurysm. So there was no warning. So when we found her, my brother came into the room and he screamed. And that scream is the scream I hear in my nightmares. I've been through a lot of therapy to be able to talk about it at this level. It was painful, but the first people I talked about it was with clients, because some clients needed to know your story to help them heal. So since then, I can talk about it. I'm Associate Professor Dr. Anasuya Jagadevi. I am the Director for the Center of Human Excellence and Development, and I am the Program Director for the Master of Counselling in Taylor's University, Malaysia.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Mallar from Hearts&Minds Development Center. Thank you for joining us again, and welcome to people who have said hi here. Hi, James. Hi, Alia. Nice to see you again. And of course, hi, Gerald. I hope more people will be joining us, because today we really, really have someone very special. As you would have seen, it's not easy to get Dr. Anasu and to talk about a topic that's really very, very important in our lives, specifically now. And she is really the expert. Of course, the month of October is the World Mental Health Day, and with that we are hoping to bring you series and stories and talks for awareness about how to look after ourselves and the people we love. Without further ado, let's very, very quickly bring in the lady that you have been watching, Dr. Anasuya. Let's bring her up. Hi.
I want a copy of your edit.
Can, no problem, no problem. Nice,
Very nice,
right?
thank you. Yeah, nice. Very, very. I know where you took a lot of it from, but you added the edits. So very beautiful. Thank you.
You are so beautiful. Ah, so
Your
thank
team
you.
did a great job. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I've watched you. I've been in I think 2 spaces when you spoke, and both times you've left an impact, right? And I'm very grateful that you said yes and you could make it today. And because grief is something that I realized in the last couple of months when we're talking about different topics, right? It has sort of peeped in and out. And when I think about grief, I only think about you. Even though many people can talk about grief. So it's really nice to have you. Thank you very much. Now let's get right into the topic. So
Sure,
when
let's
we talk about grief, really, what is grief, Dr. Nasu?
Grief is a sense of loss. It's that this was my life. Now there's something missing in my life. When we talk about grief, it can be anything. You can miss a dream life. A lot of people who've divorced don't realize they're going through grief. They may not miss the person, their life with that person is over, but they may be grieving the loss of the dream life that they had with that person. That might actually live beyond the divorce. So it's not that you don't miss the person. The person was horrible, but the person you originally met and you married when y'all were in love and you had that. So that can be one form of grief. Bereavement in particular means someone has died. So when people say bereavement, it means that somebody has passed on and that person is never coming back. And there is a special kind of grief for death related to death, because in all other kinds of grief, there is maybe a 0.01% chance you might find it again. You might overcome it. You might meet the person again. But with death, that grief is going to be, that person is gone. And the funny thing about death is that people think the grief gets less. It doesn't. The intensity of the grief that you lost somebody you loved. I mean, I lost my mom 20 years ago. When I actually allow myself to experience the grief, those moments when I experience the grief is as intense as it was 20 years ago, because you know what? I still love my mother. I'm alive. I love my mother. She was a wonderful person. I don't obsess over it. I'm not I'm not entangled or enmeshed in it. It's not interfering with my daily life. But my mother was such a wonderful, amazing force in my life that every once in a while there are a few minutes where I feel it honors her memory to think of it and then remember that, how much she was so rich in my life. And when this kind of grief, it doesn't have to be all pain. There's a mix of joy, there's a lot of love. But if you try to forget the pain, you also forget the love. You also forget to honor the memory. So, grief is such a amazing thing. It is not one thing. And that's the thing that we get confused. We think grief has to be this one thing. It's not. And for everybody, grief has different meaning. For every relationship that you lost, grief has different meaning. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about somebody who died passing on, you know, that grief is about love. So if that grief disappears altogether, then sometimes you don't think about that person at all, and that's what some people do. They don't think about the person, so they don't grieve. But then you also don't think about the good times, because then the good times also, so sometimes it's complicated.
Yeah.
Does
So
that make sense?
yeah, it's making a lot of sense. I'm glad, because I think very often we tend, there is a tendency, even for me, right, that we associate grief to only loss of a person, right?
Mm,
And you've put it, because we are reading a lot about grief nowadays, how people are missing a lot of things in their life, and they don't
yes.
understand that they are experiencing grief.
Yep.
Sometimes we don't give ourselves permission that this is important, and I'm experiencing a loss, and I'm really sad about it. And yeah,
There's a lot of people who were in grief during COVID, not for
yeah,
anything, but you grieve the loss of your lifestyle. You grieve the loss of your friend, no, the loss of connection and friendships, and just talking to people. And actually, a lot of people went into grief. It's not just that they went into grief. Oh, it's COVID. I'm depressed about COVID. No, it's you know I understand that I cannot go out. I understand that I have to do all this. My logically, all the things I understand, my brain is fine with it, but my heart, I miss it.
mm, mm.
And that complicated a lot of things as well.
Right. So tell me, how do I know if I'm in grief? Like, how do sometimes we may not. I'm just wondering whether we will know whether we are experiencing grief? Because one of the first things when COVID hit is I was talking to a friend and I said, I'm feeling really sad and I think I'm experiencing grief, right? In the first couple of months, it just came out of me and said there's just been so much of losses, right? Because I
Yeah,
was waking up feeling really sad.
yeah.
And she said, cannot be like, because I think you're using it wrongly. So, and also, we have coping strategies where we distract ourselves perhaps with other things and we
Yeah.
may think that we are not experiencing grief, right? So tell us, how do I know that first I might be experiencing grief, or, somebody else is experiencing grief? Is there a
You
way?
see, you hit the nail on the head. People kind of combine
Mm.
grief and depression.
Mm.
Sometimes what we're just experiencing is grief. We're not depressed, we're grieving, we're missing something. We feel a sense of loss. If you're feeling a sense of loss and you have lost something, you're not depressed, you're in grief.
Mm.
You don't need to go and medicate. You're in grief. You just need to allow that process to go and, go through that process of grief, and it will go. That is one of the things about grief, is because you're missing something. So,
Mm.
and if you can identify, yeah, this has happened, so I'm missing it, give yourself a few days, give yourself some space. And as long as you're functional, you're okay. So if you take 2 3 days off, and to kind of to allow yourself to experience the loss, and then find other things to take its place. What it does is it gives you space to express yourself without giving you this need to go and say, oh, I'm in depression, I'm in this, I'm in that, or maybe I'm getting depressed. Sometimes we're using the term depression a lot stronger than we need to use it, because when it comes to grief, it is a process. Grief will go. If you let the process happen, grief will go. Some positive psychology doesn't mean we don't experience the negative. I think some people think that, oh, positive psychology means I got to be happy all the time. No, what it means is that when I experience something, I authentically experience it with the understanding that even this will pass, even this will go. But I can authentically experience the fact that, yes, I'm in grief. I need a few days. I need some time. I will process it and I will be okay without going into full out depression. But nowadays,
Mm.
we use that banner of depression for almost everything. And
Right.
here's one of those things that, especially when people pass away, if you know people have passed away and then you're saying you're depressed, no, you're not, you're in grief. And taking pills, and you're taking pills when you're in grief, especially in the first few months, does not help, because grief means my brain needs to process that this person is dead. My heart needs to process that this person is dead. If I'm taking a pill to numb the feeling, then all I'm doing is prolonging it. Because once I stop taking that pill and I remember that this person is dead, my brain has not processed it yet. I still need to process that loss. So, one of those things when you're looking at grief and loss, that's why in that first 1 year, 6 months, we very strongly tell people, let the grief process go, let people go through their grieving process. The big question is, are they functional? If they're functional, allow them to function. Allow them to grieve in their own way. We only interfere as friends and family if to support them in being functional, to make
Okay.
sure that they are getting through day to day. But their own grief, let that grief process go through, and they will reach out if they need help. I've heard people say, oh no, you're crying too much. Is she
Mm.
crying in front of you? Is she crying in front of you? You have asked her to talk about the family, she's crying. You don't ask her to talk, she's not crying. So who's the one who's making her cry? You have asked her to talk about the family, and then she's crying, and then you go and say, oh, you're crying too much. I'm sorry, that's not the right way to do things. If she's not talking about it and she's not crying and she's functional, okay, let it go. Don't ask. But if they ask, then you have given the space for them, or they think you have given the space and respect for them to grieve, and they are processing the grief. Then you accept that you ask the question. One of the biggest problems nowadays we have when we are supporting people with grief is we ask them, how are you doing? How are you doing after the loss? And then they actually go, no, I'm not doing so well, but I'm slowly going through it. Oh, but you should be over it already. But it's been
Yeah.
4 months already.
Yeah.
Ayo.
Yeah. Can you get on with life? You need to be strong.
No,
You're stronger than you think. Oh my God, I want to
if
kill all of
if
them.
if you if in, on surface level they are functioning, don't have to ask.
Okay.
You genuinely don't have to ask. Let them do it. The people, they will go through it in their own way. And if they are not functional, so okay, so after 6, 7 months, you're not looking after your kids, you're not getting on with your job, you really cannot function. That is when family has to step in. As long as they're physically functioning, we give them that year. Whichever religion we are, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, all the ancient religions did this very well. That 1 year is given to the people who've passed on, to process that. We are not supposed to disturb. We're supposed to let people be in grief for 1 year. I'm actually totally encouraging that, because our ancestors did know something about human psychology. They did know about family. They did know about how to keep families going. So really, one of the things we need to respect is that 1 year. When people die in that 1 year, if as long as they're functioning, leave them alone. Let them process the emotion. Let them grieve. Let them cry. They want to cry every day also. As long as they're functioning, leave it. When they need
Mm.
help, they ask. If they're not functioning, then step in, because children have to be fed, they have to go to work, bills have to be paid. If those things are not being done, that's when we step in. Okay, so
And
that's the
how long do we? So two big things you've actually said, right? One is uh, grief is a process. Let people process, and they need time, right? And let them take their time, and they need to run the mile, basically, right? Experience it, right? Now, so when you talk about process, right? So, like, is there a way of understanding this process?
okay. I am very against Kubler-Ross.
Okay.
If you any Most of you all would have heard of Kubler-Ross, and I'm going to tell you all upfront, Kubler-Ross did their research on people in hospice care. So these are individuals who are anticipating their own death. So the Kubler-Ross research on grief and dying was on how people anticipated their own death and then could transcend the thought of their own death. Now I'm going to ask everybody here, or everybody listening, if you dare tell a parent who lost a child, you need to transcend the death of the loss of your child. You need to understand human emotions.
Mm.
But that's what some people have done. They tell the parents, because Kubler-Ross, you have to transcend the loss of it. Are you what the where where's your humanity, lah? You
Mm.
know,
Mm. Mm.
you cannot. Parents cannot. You can't transcend the loss of a child. If your partner that you love is somebody you love very, very greatly, there's no way you can transcend that loss. Transcending that loss just is not a logical thing when you actually look at human experience. So what actually happens, if you're looking at theoretically what is a better example of grief and loss, is the dual process model. The
Mm.
dual process model is, when we are functioning, we focus on functioning. When we are grieving, we focus on grieving. So, and
Mm.
if we don't do it together, we actually do it, in separately. So if you can think of situations where people have died, and I've I'll give you one example. There's this one individual who lost somebody very dear to them, and they would function at work 100%. Everything is okay. Don't
Mm.
think about it. No, no crying, nothing. All okay. The minute they get down, they go into the car park. They sit down inside their car. They sit down inside their car. Suddenly, they started crying. And
Mm.
this was within the first few months of the loss of the person. Suddenly, they'll start crying, and they cannot stop crying. And they cried out for about 1 hour. Then they get back in the car. They drive home. They need to go and cook. They need to go and feed people. They're focused on feeding people and all that. And then they're coming and calling me and saying, "What's wrong with me? Why in my car am I breaking down?" I'm like, that's perfectly normal. That's what we do. When
Mm.
we focus on work, we focus on our work. Then when we have this window where we are by ourselves, and we
Mm.
need and suddenly the brain says, okay, I can now think of the grief. I can now remember the loss. And we suddenly remember it. And we remember it very strongly. Now,
Mm.
take it for people who've lost people for many years. This 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 portion of us functioning versus the portion of us grieving. So if it just happened, sometimes the portion of us grieving is very big and functioning is very small. As time goes by, functioning becomes a lot bigger and our grieving becomes small, until we have what is known as a sudden, the word they use in the textbook is traumatic upsurge of grief. I prefer sudden therapeutic upsurge of grief because I find it therapeutic myself. Well, I've made it therapeutic for myself, where you don't think of this person for a whole year, and then suddenly you're walking, you see sunlight through the leaves, you're hanging out the clothes, you're at work and you see this video of something, and suddenly you remember this person. And the minute you remember that person, it feels like the person died yesterday. The whole loss comes back in a strong surge. So at that moment, you've gone into the processing of grief where you're processing the emotions again. And here's my suggestion: let yourself experience that, because that person who died, who meant so much of you, so much to you, they kind of deserve to be remembered. And they deserve that, because they, it's for me, it's an honor when it's honoring the memory of these people, of my loved ones, because they meant a lot, and they still mean a lot. And even their death does not reduce how much they meant to me. So, I'm alive, and as long as I'm alive, their memory is what I'm remembering when I have this memory of them, and my brain is processing the grief. And when it's processing the grief, then I let it process. And what I'll do is I write a poem, I write something on Facebook, I'll call a friend, I'll sit down there, have a coffee, and just think of them, go and look at, and it doesn't last for very long. It can last for 2 minutes, last for 5 minutes, depending on what I choose to do. So I make it therapeutic for myself. But but that's the process. So the process is, we'll start functioning, then we'll remember for a period of time. So keep, as long as we start reducing that period, and the time of us functioning will get longer and longer, the period of us grieving will get shorter and shorter. The intensity for most people doesn't change. Some people will change, some, because it depends on your relationship with the person who died. So for some of us, the intensity will change. For some of us, the intensity won't change. Sometimes you may not even remember the person's face, but you remember the feeling.
Mm,
Okay.
mm, mm.
Thank you, Regina. Yeah. I mean, I am seeing the questions in the chat box. I was going to ask Malhar,
Yes,
can I
yes, we'll
address?
come to that. We'll come to that. I often get priority because I invited you, so I ask all the questions that makes me happy.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. Okay, you ask your questions.
So
Yeah.
just a couple more things.
Sure.
Fantastic, right? So what is very clear is, I love the dual function model, because you say that, as long as we're functioning, it's okay. And, when you need to grieve, you just go through the process, right?
Yes.
And the individual knows what he or she is experiencing, because the relationship is personal. Only they know.
Yes.
I mean, who are we to judge how much you should grieve what that person meant to you, right?
Yes. 100%.
Yes, it's very personal. What I'm trying to understand is that, so when we see someone grieving, right, when you say functional, and initially if they become dysfunctional, I mean, we understand it's normal, right? But you did mention, say, about 7 months, right? You did say 7 months. So when do we know, like, in a shorter time? So when we talk about them being dysfunctional, like, some people will say, I don't feel like going to work, I can take a couple of days off, or I might want to not work at all, right? I might just decide, I just want to be
Are
home.
they borrowing money from you?
Sorry, no.
Are they borrowing money from you? Are they borrowing money from the rest of the family? Are they sponging off other people's money, or are they using their savings?
Okay, so
You
those
see,
are, yeah,
those
okay.
are those are critical questions. Are there children involved? I said 7 months, assuming that there are no children involved.
Okay,
If there are children and the children need to be fed, if the mother is not feeding the children in a month, 2 months, then people
okay.
need to step in and say, okay, look, what kind of support can we give? Okay?
Okay.
And then maybe get outside support to come in. So it all depends on what is the situation with functionality, because people can take a gap year
Mm,
during, because now for school, for university students and all, oh, I want to take a gap year. But that has extended now into our culture, where people go, life is too much, I need a break from life, I got enough savings, I'm taking a break.
mm.
So a lot of it depends on situation. I cannot give you one
Sure.
answer. You
Got it.
have to see the situation involved.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So as long as they are okay and they're surviving, so how do we know if someone is grieving and well, they're not coming to us and they seem to be in their own world, especially in isolation? So are you saying that it's okay to leave them until they ask us for help or support?
No, that's where the 1 year part comes in. If they're going on longer than that, I would actually step in.
Okay.
Minimum, I would step in is after 7 months. If you look at the DSM-5, where they talk about complicated grief, it's
Mm,
supposed to be 6 months. But because of our culture, because of Asian culture, I would give it 1 year. Because Asian culture, we are uh, in our culture, it is actually normal for people to not do much for that 1 year. You don't go to parties, you don't go to functions. In culturally, for Hindus, if somebody dies in that 1 year, you don't go for the prayer celebrations. You don't have big
mm,
celebrations. You're so. some people may be mirroring that in their behavior,
Mm,
even though they may not be following, they may not be following so strongly their religion or their thing. They may
mm,
actually mirror that because they've seen it when they were children, and it
mm,
felt correct to them. It
mm,
felt like this is the right way to respect somebody who's dead. So although they may not articulate it like, this is my culture, I'm doing it, they may actually just start, withdrawing. But after 1 year, if they're still not doing it, then you can have a conversation with them. Sit down and talk first before you assume. One of the
okay.
biggest things, unfortunately, we do is we talk to everybody else and not the person involved. Because,
Mm,
the easier conversations is to talk to your friends, talk to their family, talk to everybody. But to talk to that person, very scary.
mm,
So one
mm,
big thing I suggest is have a sit down, tell the person,
mm,
okay, look, what's going on? Do you need support?
mm,
Do you think this can continue? So
mm.
just have a conversation without getting emotional. Be kind in that conversation, have compassion in that conversation, and the conversation may work.
When you say without getting emotional, what do you what do you mean?
Don't get agitated when
Ah,
when I'm going in to support somebody who is in pain, when I'm going in to support somebody who's already overwhelmed by a situation, if you come in very happy, if you come in very, no, come on, you can do this, you can do this, you're only going to overwhelm them.
mm,
Your sheer positivity when somebody is already negatively overwhelmed, if I'm
mm,
overwhelmed, it means that I'm full of emotion, I'm already
right.
full. So if
Mm,
you are coming in full without giving me space,
mm,
then I got no space to go, I explode. They will probably reject you, and they'll probably push you away and say, you don't understand, go away. You
mm.
need to come in calm. You need to
Okay.
come in with your emotions very calm, very compassionate, and your emotions in the back burner, because
Mm,
they need to have space for you to let you. Okay, I don't know whether I can articulate this clearly, descriptively enough, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to be calm and provide an emotional space. So I pull back my energy, I pull back my emotions, and I am now giving you space so that you can come into my space and empty yourself into my space. So I'm giving you my space in this conversation. So by
mm.
you talking to me, I take some of that fullness, and at the end of the conversation, you feel lighter.
Nice.
The person feels lighter, they feel better. You may not feel so good because you've just listened to everything, but you've come in with that intention in mind. So then you manage your emotions and you throw it out later. Lah. You
Okay.
don't have to settle
So
people.
what I'm hearing from you is if you want to go in to support people, do a check-in with yourself to see whether you are ready to provide that support, right? And because what
Yeah.
you don't want to do is you don't want to go with your outcomes and your intention. Because you are there to
Bingo.
hold, yeah, you don't want to be this motivator, I'm going to save you and make your life better kind of a mindset, but rather I'm there to hold space for you, I'm just going to be there present for you, and for
Yes.
that I just need to make sure that I'm in a space where I'm at ease, calm and kind, and I would say neutralized from my own intentions and outcomes, because I
Mhm.
am here now for you, and because
Yes.
I'm here for you, and I'll be present for you when you say whatever. I know I would be disturbed because I love you, I care for you, but that's the role I have chosen to take, right? And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, okay, nice, thank you very much. I'm just going to read a couple of comments because there's a
Sure.
big question here from Regina, which I'm sure you've already read, but I'm just going to read
Anything.
the comments and then we go to the question. Yeah, Jay Kumar says every human experience grief, but it is the individual's resilience, some take very long. So I'm just curious, has because from what you've said and what Jay Kumar is saying, has resilience, does it mean that if I grieve for a longer time and it's intense for me, it sounds like from what you said, it is my relationship with the person that impacts the length, the process, the intensity, right? But
Yep.
does it have anything to do with resilience, Dr. Anasuya?
Resilience is your ability to bounce back. Your ability to bounce back from a bad situation. Like I said, people can be resilient in many ways except the loss of a loved one. Because the loss of a loved one, you are not bouncing back. You are
Mm,
processing the loss. So
mm,
very strong. I'm going to use the word inverted commas because I don't think it's the right word, but it's a normal word. Very strong people. So many things go wrong in their life. They're okay, and then they lose one loved one and they seem to break down, and everybody's like, oh my God, what happened to him? Oh, for goodness sake,
Mm. Mm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
it,
I've seen like in my circle, because I'm the training circle, so called, very positive, motivational speakers, right? So even if I say I'm feeling down, I would have people who tell me, but you're emotionally intelligent trainer. I said, hello, I'm human first, right? It's
no,
almost,
can I correct you on that?
yeah.
The fact that I can feel down and I can articulate that I feel down shows my level of emotional intelligence. Your inability to accept my feeling down shows your inability to process my real emotions.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that's not emotionally intelligent. That is
Thank
that
you.
is one-sided view of emotions.
Thank you.
Emotionally intelligent is to understand the gamut of human emotions and recognize that just because it's not a rah 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 emotion does not make it bad.
Yeah.
Loss, grief is not a bad emotion, it's a natural emotion. It is what draws us together as a human race. It is as needed as love. Without grief, what is love?
Mm.
Okay, if we don't miss the person, then who are they?
Yeah, if there was no love, I won't grieve anyway, isn't it?
Exactly. So, it's one or the other. It's the fact that we are mortal.
Thank
We
you.
grieve because we are mortal and we love. That's why we grieve. If we don't love, we don't have to grieve.
Thank
So
you.
this notion of the emotionally intelligent only being for positive emotions, I'm like, hello, can y'all please go and check the word emotional intelligence?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we say this because I think nowadays a lot of what is seen as strength on the outside, which is self-control, not showing, what I'm feeling or what I'm experiencing, which is sometimes held as weakness, is, sometimes thrown that you're not strong just because you are expressing what you're going through, right? And I think that tends to happen. But anyway, Alia says, excellent advice. Many people make it worse for those who have lost someone by giving on unsolicited advice. For me, until now, I really, when it comes to grief moments, I find that I never know what is the right thing to say. So for me, the best thing is I'll just keep quiet because I really don't know what's the right thing to say. Yeah.
I'm
So
here.
she says, I'm
My sincere condolences. I'm here for you.
because
Nothing
you would
else.
have people who are trying to be logical who will say they are in a better place. Thank God they are not
No,
suffering.
don't say that. Don't say that. Don't,
I
especially
know.
the children. Especially if they've lost the child. Please, please, please shut your mouth.
Yeah.
I don't want to be
Yeah.
rude, but I could say, but please, if it's a child and those words, you're feeling them on your lips, bite your tongue, do not say it. I've
Yeah.
seen people traumatized by words like that. So please
Mm.
don't say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
On the side, I don't say this to people, but on the side, in my own mind, when I want to humor myself, I say, when people say, I think it's good, if they passed on because they're in a better place. I usually feel like telling them, why don't I send you there as well, right? But
Mhm.
Gerald
Okay,
says,
yeah, I agree with you on that. Let me just add
yeah,
this. Those type of statements are good when people are logical. You're not experiencing hot grief. You're not in grief. You are
mm,
logically talking about it. Yes, when people die, then so these are philosophies for the head.
mm,
Grief
mm,
is here in the
mm,
heart.
mm,
So
mm,
you are basically taking something that is not appropriate, wrong timing stuff, and
mm.
done at a time when it's not going to be good for the person. It's going to be a stab to the heart.
Yeah.
So just
Don't make
avoid
it
stuff like
personal.
that.
Nice. Just say, I'm here if you don't know how to say anything else, and that's all you say. That's what.
My deepest condolences. I am
Mm,
so sorry. I'm sorry for your loss. That's fine. My deepest condolences. I'm here for you. The other one to avoid is, I understand what you're going through. Unless it's the same kind of death, that means mother and mother. I lost my mom, so I understand what you're going through. That's fine. If you have not lost your mom, don't say that. If you have not lost a child, don't say that. Okay, don't say I understand what you're going through. If you have not experienced the exact similar experience that they have.
mm,
Okay. And the other one is that, don't make promises you can't keep.
mm, mm,
Will everything be okay? Yeah, I'm sure everything will be okay. No, it won't.
mm, mm.
Okay. So don't make promises you can't keep. Those are a couple of things that you try to avoid doing.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, for me, even saying I understand, I may not know the nature of the relationship you shared, for me to even
Yeah,
sometimes say I understand, right? But yeah,
but yeah, but I'm just saying that if I take away everything, then people will rebel.
yeah.
So you gotta
No,
give people
basically
some
what
things
you're
to
saying,
say.
yeah, but basically what you're saying is that, be in touch with what you really want to say, mean what you say. Don't say things because it sounds right, isn't it?
Platitudes have their place, but they're not. The place is not at the funeral. The
Thank you.
place of platitudes is not at the funeral. So in a funeral, you just be sincere. You say, "I'm so sorry for you. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm here. I'm here for you." That's it. You don't need to say anything else.
Thank you.
You genuinely don't.
All right. So Regina says you've described exactly what she's experienced. Gerald says good advice, Anasuya. I lost my dad 11 years ago. Until today, I have moments where I remember and I grieve. Each day, I celebrate my dad's life by doing what he would want and like.
Agreed.
Regina says, without grief, what is love? We grieve because we are mortal, golden nuggets. And Alia says, I believe when you lose someone, a part of you goes with them.
I say I have a
What's
hole in the heart the shape of my mom until today. I agree. I agree with Alia.
She says, what's your comment? So you've already said a hole in the heart. Thank you so much. I'm going to go on to Regina's, I would say, heavy question if you've
Go
read
ahead.
it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. He
I
says,
looked at it.
can you talk about what caused your brother to take his own life after your mother's death? Was one related to the other?
It was related to the other because my brother's behavior deteriorated after my mom died. So what happened was my brother was a very young guy who was very smart, very good looking, and he was very close to my mother.
Mm,
So when my mother died, I think a few months after that, he started trying to fill the space. And he
mm,
did it behind our back. So this was the part in the video where I said there was a lot going on that we didn't know at that time. What we
mm,
didn't know at that time is that after a couple of years, so the first few years we were all, because we were involved in the 1 year celebration, 1 year, we were all quite close. But when he started working, so a few years when he started working by himself, what happened was that uh, he uh, he 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 had two relationships at the same time
mm,
with girls. He had two relationships at the same time, and it blew up in his face. It blew up very badly,
mm,
and it shattered his opinion of who he was as a person.
mm,
So it because he always thought of himself as a good guy.
mm,
So even though he was seeing two girls at the same time, he still thought he was a good guy.
mm,
But when it exploded with their parents coming in and very badly, so
mm,
then I think it interfered with his idea of who he was.
mm,
And we suspect that he had decided to try out some amphetamines or something like that, because there were some incidents which were very specific where the behavior changed so drastically that it was not without suspicion that something else was involved. So um, what we think happened is that sometimes when some people take drugs, nothing happens. They just get high, they're okay, they take these uppers, they go for parties, they come back, they're fine. But my younger brother was hanging out with people who were 5 6 years older than him. So he was 21, 22 years old, and he was hanging out with 25, 26 year olds. And it was a group that partied a lot. And I think that he took uppers, and unfortunately for him, it taught his brain how to go to schizophrenia.
mm,
So he had a breakdown 1 year before he died. He had a huge breakdown where
mm,
he was seeing things, and he was hallucinating. So he ended up in mental hospital. He ended up in he ended up in psychiatric ward, and we tried to get him treated and all that, but he survived. And then he got back for he was okay again. And then in the next year he got a promotion at work. So usually that this is some of those things, if he go back to work again, he was working, but when he got the promotion, the stress of that promotion, he stopped sleeping. So he stopped sleeping for like 3 weeks. Whole 3 weeks he hadn't been sleeping, and it became a big issue. And I think that there were other things also involved, and that's when he decided to take his own life. So it's a pretty long story with him going to hospital, this, that, all kinds of things involved. But it was not one event
mm,
that ultimately ended up in a suicide. And this is something that people when people look at suicide, they think that it's one event that creates suicide. No, one event
Mm,
is the final drop. It's the
mm,
final drop in a glass that is already very full. So what happened after my mom's death, I think, is that things kept happening to him and he didn't want to talk to anybody. He didn't want to share. He
mm,
just wanted to pretend it didn't happen. So the more he pretended it didn't happen, the more he put it in his cup and he stuffed his cup until his cup was so full,
mm.
so that finally when certain things happened, one or two drops came in, it just exploded. And so
Wow.
that is my best explanation for what happened.
Mm.
No, I don't
Okay,
mind talking about it.
thank you. Yeah, Reg, I hope you got what you were looking for in terms of answers. So what I'm hearing is that so when we meet people and when they're talking and and they're even talking to us and saying I'm thinking of taking my life or I don't feel like living, what you're basically saying, there's a lot happening for them. So if they can talk about it, then that's the support you can probably give them.
Just be there for them. Just be human. One of the biggest things that stops people from committing suicide is connections. I think the person who has stopped the most suicide in the world is actually this guy who lives near the Golden Gate Bridge where you park your cars. So he lives near the Golden Gate Bridge where he parks your cars and he watches people outside. And he notices when people look very depressed or something, and he'll just go and offer them, drinks. He's not a counselor, he's not a therapist, he's not a psychiatrist, he's just a human being who knows that people park their cars there and go and jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. So he just provides a human connection, non-judgmental human connection.
Nice.
Sometimes what we do as friends, which is bad, is we judge.
Mm.
So take out the judgment, just be human, be with them for a few seconds as a human, and you're done. You're welcome,
Thank you.
Regina.
Thank you. All right. Nate Kumar, he says, hi, Dr. Anasuya. May I ask? Yes, you may. They say that we change when we experience big and deep, I don't know what, maybe losses, impacts
Impact.
in life. Yeah. How do we know?
If you have changed, maybe you should know. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, that's me. That's you asking me to make judgments of,
They
at
say
a
that.
psychic level. But how do we know is that we grow. And here's the thing: usually we don't know. Other people tell us
Mm,
because we are going through it day by day, and we are surviving. When we are in survival mode, when we are just trying to go through what we have to go through, we are just processing, going through, and surviving, and we very rarely stop to check how
mm,
far we've come from the start, how
mm,
far we've grown. We don't even see how far we've grown as human beings. We did
mm,
that in school with report cards and all. Now no report card, so we don't know when to stop and check how far we've come. We don't
mm,
appreciate how far we've grown. So the only
mm,
person who can answer that question at the end of the day is yourself. How far have I grown? But the only way
mm,
for you to do that is to do a life, kind of life audit, your own life audit, and you look back at your life and see, hey, I've come very far. People in
mm,
counseling have this habit of not doing that. I've had clients who've come and see me for different issues, and after 1 year, sometimes after 1 year, they come and tell me, doctor, I've gone through so many things. I don't think I've changed. I said, you don't think you've changed? Okay, let's check on that. And I go and
right.
I show them how they were at the beginning and how they were now. Then they're like, oh wow, I changed so much. Yeah, take stock. Give
Thank
yourself
you.
a break. Take stock.
Nate, here, he's asking the next question. I'm just going to ask it because he has asked it. Okay. How do we know? Because I can imagine your response. How do we know whether the good changes or bad? Is the change good or bad for the other person?
For the person itself, how do you know? You don't. That's the biggest. So look, if depends on the outcome of the change.
Right.
Okay, if the change, and some changes get okay. Okay, I'm going to go back to my mom's death. So what happened when my mom died? I was only 22, and there was a lot. My family is a little bit of a public figure at that point in time, especially in our community. And there was a lot of gossip. There was a lot of negativity. There were a lot of guns pointed at the family from people we knew, people who meant well or people who didn't really mean well and just wanted to talk bad. Okay, so all kinds of gossip. So you all know what Malaysians are like. And so at that point in time, I was very angry. If you knew me when I was in my 20s, at that point in time, the anger kept people away. It protected as much as I can my younger sister, my brother, the house. I tried to protect it with anger because I didn't have any other skill. anger was the best skill I had to protect my family. Now,
Mm,
it served its purpose for a few years.
mm,
Then it turned on me. Then that anger became my own enemy. I was very short tempered. You were not, I didn't like what I was becoming.
mm,
So initially, I needed it. I didn't recognize it, but it was good.
mm,
Everybody else was saying it's bad, but the effect of it, it kept my family safe, so it was good. But
mm,
after a while, it started tearing up at me.
mm,
Then I had to go and deal with that. And that was
mm,
my own processing. So the person who decided that I wanted to change, that my change was no longer functional, was me. But I recognized that the reason why I got angry was good. So I don't reject the person I was then. I think that person was needed. I now
mm.
when I need to get angry, I can tap on that learning which I had when I was in my 20s to show an angry face to students. Okay. And I'm still in control of it. But at one point in time, I had to take stock and say, look, this is what I did. I needed it when I was a bit younger. I don't need it anymore. But
Right.
that doesn't make it bad. I
Got
don't reject my own experiences, my
it.
negative experiences. I don't reject my negative experiences as good change or bad change. I look at the changes that I experience as necessary for that situation, because anything that I do for myself, I truly believe comes from a more positive place inside me. Because I don't know what you believe in, higher selves or lower self, but I believe that my higher self, and sometimes how it projects itself may be negative, but it's needed at that point in time because of my skill levels. So when I
Mm,
look back in my past, what even mistakes that I made, those mistakes were made with the best intention,
mm,
given limited resources, and I
mm.
cannot stand where I am now and judge myself then and then
Right.
say, how could I have done that? I was so, all. So I don't do that. I've really worked at not doing that. This is something which I worked with myself, and after I work with myself, I work with clients on, is to help people see that you integrate from your past into your present, so that when you are present, you're present with the whole of yourself. They're not parts of yourself where you say, I don't like this person. I
Nice.
don't like the me then. I reject the me then. That's also something, then we are grieving the loss of our own self.
Mm.
I
Nice.
hope that made sense. That was
No, I
that
think
was
we can
about
just do one session just on that, being the whole person
yeah.
and accepting all of you at all moments. And what I'm hearing from you is that whoever the person you are, we tap into what works for us at that time, best. I don't think anyone makes less than best choices based on the resources that they have, right? And that's really what you're saying. So thank you very much. Regina says, yes, mother, thanks, Anasuya. I wanted to understand what happened and to understand how it's connected. It sounds like a disconnection happened. I'm thinking of a family friend. Their mother also died from brain aneurysm. Thanks again. The impact was deeper than we could fathom for the family.
Yeah.
And Alia says, thank you. Be the person you love most of the people who are gone. Now, I have one big question, and I so there are no more questions, which means I can ask the big question. So, with COVID and loss associated to COVID, where people don't even get to grieve the way they normally grieve, can't say goodbye, can't meet the people. Tell us, how what's
It's called
yeah,
the term is called disenfranchised grief, because you're grieving in a way that is not normal, and the way you're normally supposed to grieve is affected.
right.
So okay, I lost one of my grand aunts. We weren't the closest aunt during COVID, during the original COVID, and but she had gone through so much, and she was an old woman who had lived so much. And when I saw her funeral, where they videotaped it and all that, and you see just 10 people there, it's COVID, but you cannot help that feel that it's not enough, that not enough is being done, that I know I'm sitting here in my house, it's not right.
Mm,
So this
mm,
is part of our culture, it's part of what makes us a community, it's part of what makes us Malaysian. It doesn't matter whether they're Indian, Chinese, Malay, it doesn't matter what the ritual is. For most funerals, all of us go, and we go when it's somebody we care about, and
mm,
there's a beauty in it, and a lot of us were deprived from that. We were
mm,
deprived from helping, we were deprived from being there. The
mm,
presence that is so important is
mm,
gone.
Mm.
So all of this leads to a time of when you have a when we are grieving at this point in time, it actually does go down and does easily become complicated grief, where the grieving process, you may need some support to talk about it, you may need some support to process it. I actually do encourage people to do the ritual themselves. If they feel close enough to that person and they were not part of the funeral, okay, go to your temple, go to your church, go to your gurudwara, go to your mosque, ask them, look, I cannot, I felt this loss of the person, I'm still feeling bad about it, can I do a personal, like a personal goodbye with with what is meaning, in a way that's meaningful for me and
Right.
meaningful for that person. You don't have to involve other people. Do
Right.
your own rituals of goodbye, because it is important.
Okay. And how about, loss or death, right? Due to COVID, where you don't even actually get to say goodbye or see,
Yeah.
right? What's your advice on how we can cope better for situations like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, do your own goodbye rituals that in the location that you can do it at. So at
Mm,
whatever place that you can do, find your own rituals to do.
mm,
Some people find it good to, okay, I'll take all the pictures, because now we have the habit of having everything online. So
right.
one way of doing things, because people like things physical still. So do something like a photo journal. So download the pictures of that person from, you can't go and see the person physically. So take all the pictures that you can find, download, create a very nice book for the person or memory for the person. Either you can keep it yourself or you can give it to a family member who was also not there,
Okay.
who was also deprived from being there, because then it creates a sense of community. You can write poems, you can write letters, you can do something in memory of that person. So okay, I will go and in a home or an orphanage or in the park, I'll put a bench in the park for that person, or I will go and, depending on what they do a cleanup day in honor of the person. Feed people. I mean, Hindu custom, they like to feed people in honor of people, so you feed the poor. So I mean,
Mm,
whatever you do in the memory of that person, all of it helps. Okay,
nice.
but find a way to say goodbye so that you feel that you can close that chapter. Because if you don't find a way to say goodbye and the chapter is open, that is when you create a sense of, things are not complete. I have not finished this. Other emotions start coming in, and it becomes an issue.
So tell me, find a way to say goodbye,
Hmm.
because what if I don't, sometimes like because I'm talking to a couple of friends who have lost a loved one, right? And so one of those things that I keep hearing is, but I didn't say goodbye. I can't say goodbye. I didn't see, and I don't want to say goodbye. I mean, that's the initial stage, right? So when you say find a way to say goodbye, I mean, can you expand on it a little bit more as to when we are not ready, how do we say the goodbye?
If you're not ready, you're not going to say goodbye.
Mm.
That's where your trauma is going to come in.
Mm.
That's where you're not going to be facing the grief. That's where you're going to be continue grieving. So you're only, if you want to start the healing, then you need to start saying goodbye when somebody has passed on. But if you have not started the healing, you're still grieving, then you're not said goodbye. Then you're still in the process of grieving. So you've not yet said goodbye.
Okay, got
And
it.
some people grieve for
Mm.
many, many years,
Yeah.
never heal, because they don't allow themselves to heal.
Mm. And there's nothing we can do about it because it's their own.
I mean, they have to figure it out. You cannot force somebody to drink.
Yep.
You can
Yep.
put the glass there, you can put the water there, and they don't want to drink, they don't want to drink. You can't
Mm.
force that. And the
Mm.
more you force, the more they push back.
Yeah. Okay.
Jay, you knew my brother? Yeah, he was a wonderful person. I miss him a lot. He was gorgeous, he was handsome, drop dead handsome, but yeah. So there you go. Yeah, he was one of those young guys that burned bright and crashed.
How do you deal with your missing?
Oh, it took long time.
Mm.
I to actually deal with it. I mean, I did some not so nice things to myself, uh, in the initial process when I was trying to pretend I didn't feel guilty when he died, because then I tried to pretend I didn't feel guilty. I didn't work. I self-sabotaged a bit at that point in time. But then I sat down and I started, it is kind of meditation, not exactly, well, because I sat in the park or I sat on the beach and just face myself. And then it still continued. Then like I said, I've in the video I did say I went for therapy, so I did go for different types of therapy at different points
Mm.
to deal with it.
I'm just curious because you brought up the word guilty. So what? How do you
You
deal with
never
guilt?
committed suicide. How do you not feel guilty? No matter what you try to tell yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So when, because I think in our relationship, especially when we do have, I mean, in your case it's an extreme one, but we do lose people and lose relationships, and we have guilt of what we could have done better or what we should have done. Either guilt or regret, right? Is there what would your advice be to deal with it?
The first thing is I'm not God. So the word I should have, the more I go, I should have, the more I go, I can't do anything.
Mm,
You can't do anything. So the first thing is to accept the fact that I'm not God and I can't change what I did. So then just make sure I do better in the future so I learn what I need to learn. Now, here's the thing, people always tell you to get out your emotions. So, question how?
mm,
You see, there are ways to get out your emotions. There are activities that you can do that help
mm,
you take out emotions from inside to the outside and let it go in a healing manner. So there are lots of things that people can do. One of the things is actually, if you believe in God, whichever God, all the gods, prayer. Why prayer is important? It's not to praise God. It's to actually allow us to, because the surrender your negative emotions to God.
mm,
So if you can think of the idea of I surrender my negative emotions to God, I take out my negative emotions from me and I give it to God.
mm,
So no, but nowadays sometimes some people go is, oh, you can't do that. You can't give negative things to God. For me, that's wrong.
mm,
If you cannot give negative things to God, what can you give to God? As much as you can give God praise, you can give God your anger, you can give God your sadness, you can give God your ugly thoughts, your dirty thoughts, because that's God. God can take everything. God made everything after all. So God doesn't judge between good. We are the ones who judge.
mm.
So yeah, and I hate to say this, but the excrement from our body was also made by God. Okay, so there's nothing that God didn't make. So when you want to give the emotions, give the negative emotions to God. Don't just surrender good emotions. So surrender that's one of those ways. The other like non-God ways which you can also use to take out those emotions, and there are activities that can be done.
Okay. So basically, what you're saying is that, whatever you're feeling, just, meet your needs, find out what's happening, and find ways to actually give it the experience and the expression that it requires.
And get the support that you need. Support is
Mm,
important. Don't and if people judging you is not support. People telling you what to do is not support.
mm,
Okay, the biggest. And she keeps saying, "What's your advice? What's your advice?" I'm like, I'm just giving suggestions. I'm not giving you all advice. Y'all can choose through whatever you want. Okay,
mm,
I'm not really giving advice. I'm just giving you all a series of suggestions of different experiences of what worked for me, which may or may not work for you, and you
mm,
need to find your own way to do it. But I'm not really asking y'all to do anything or giving y'all advice that this is the best way to do it.
mm, mm. It's basically finding what works for us, lah,
Yes, what
right?
works
And
for you.
which means that we need to reconnect within.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
need to reconnect with yourself.
Sorry.
Yeah, you need to reconnect with yourself. You're
Yeah,
correct.
it's just reconnection. So one last question, because it's almost 1 o'clock and I think we
God,
can
it
go
is one.
on. When do I, so if it's me and I'm going through a down, whether it's because of grief or because of other very strong emotions that I'm experiencing, right? When when do I decide I'm going to seek help, or how do I know I need to seek help?
Well, how do I know when I went to seek help?
Professional help. That's professional.
When
When
you
do I seek
feel you
help?
need it, or when your best friends tell you need it.
Mm,
There are two ways of doing it. One is when you feel you need it, and the
mm,
other one is when your best friends, the people who really know you well, people are close to you, when they tell you you need to talk to somebody. There are two ways, okay? And sometimes the second way is the most common way that we like to ignore that one. But actually, your best friends, those who normally you talk to, and they finally say, "Look, I've tried my best, but I think you need help."
Okay.
When your friends are telling you that, get help, because what your friends are telling you is that they are getting overwhelmed
Mm.
and they have tried. They've reached the limit of their skill, so they're
Right.
asking you to get help.
Mm. Mm. Nice.
Yep.
Thank you, Sundar. Sundar says, share all emotions to Almighty is a nice point. He's the only one who can cleanse it.
Well,
I
you
have
can cleanse it also, but he can help. She can help. I'm not going to go and gender God.
Okay, I have one question that may not be directly associated to grief because I'm curious and I want to hear from you, right? So, how do I? So, because you did say, people, we spoke briefly about depression and differentiating grief and depression, right? So, um, do you mind before going, tell us how do we know that we're going through a depression or someone else is going through a depression?
No, when you're going through depression, it means that you feel that life is very down. It's quite dark. The emotions are heavy. You're trapped. Those kinds of feelings that you have for depression. The difference between grief and depression is, with grief, you know that there's a sense of loss. Something has been taken,
Sure.
and you can usually identify what is taken. So that's how
Mm.
you differentiate between grief and depression. But depression is just that feeling, that overall feeling. But right now we are using the word depression like it's everything. Like, like I've got the flu. Like, I've got depression, it's like I got the flu. Everything is the flu. Everything is depression. No, that doesn't quite work that way.
Nice,
Because
nice.
sometimes people self-medicate, because what worked one time also better not. Yeah, Raj, I'm just joking, okay?
No, I mean, a lot of people are self-diagnosing now, right? When
no,
I
I know Sundar's comments. He or she is. It's okay.
it's okay.
Sundar's comment. I'm referring to that.
Thank you.
So,
All
yeah.
right. So thank you very, very much for your time, taking time to talk to us about grief and sharing your thoughts as usual. One very passionately, and I think the other thing I recognize about you, which I love about you, is accuracy is extremely important for you, and yeah, because you always bring it back to what do you really mean, and I think. The other thing that I keep hearing from you, again today I learned that from you, is I can tell you what I know, but it is really the individual who decides, where he or she is going to take the life. It's the
Yeah.
freedom to live
And
your life.
I'd like to say this to everybody. Thank you very much for listening. And I want to say that I shared my opinion. I will apologize if any of that opinion in any way caused you any harm. It is not meant to cause harm in any way, but it is sometimes because of the topic that we are sharing. It may cause harm, and I do apologize if I did. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you, thank you. Any last tips that you want to give before we say goodbye to you, Dr. Anasuya? No. Okay.
Have a
No
good lunch.
more.
Have a good lunch. Have a good dinner.
Okay. Thank you very much. You have a great week. Thank you once again. And yeah, we hope to see you soon. Sundar says, excellent takeaway. Everything is a suggestion, not an advice. So he got it, we got it. So no more advices. Thank you very much, Dr. Anasu. You have a great week ahead. Oh, okay.
Thank
Jael
you.
says, thank you for another wonderful Friday session. Thank you, Malal. Thank you, Anasuya. All right. So thank you very much. You have a great lunch and great days ahead, Dr. Anasu, supporting people that you do. All right. With that, I hope today the topic on grief was useful. And if you're experiencing grief and you know someone who's experiencing grief, we hope that this topic with Dr. Anasuya would have given us some light, some guide as to what we can do to hold space and be of support to people, the do's and don'ts that was given to us very nicely for us to understand what people are experiencing. So with that, thank you very much for those who tuned in with us as every Friday, and have a great week. Stay safe until I see you next Friday again with another interesting guest and we'll be focusing on mental health. Signing off, this is Malhar from Hearts and Minds Development Center. Stay wonderful.